Teddy, darling, you sit up, please. Oh, wakey, wakey. You sit up, please.
Hey, Teddy.
You sit
How
up.
are you?
There we are. There we are. Okay, good. Are you ready to say hello to our guests and our audience? You ready to say hello?
Yeah.
Well, maybe quite yet.
Well, exactly. He's only just woken up.
Have you got anything to say at all? No, not yet. Have you got anything to say to our guests, Teddy? I mean, to our guests and our audience. Okay, we're facing the camera now. That's good. Okay. Have you got something to say? Woof. Woof. Okay. Well, that
very
is
nice to meet you too.
That is a hello. And how about a hello and welcome? Can we have a hello and welcome? Is there going to be anything else, Teddy, darling? Woof. Okay. Well, I think for a dog spoken up, that's pretty good. That's hello and welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna, and Teddy, and our wonderful guests today. Oh, thank you for the pour, darling. Our wonderful guest today, who is Kathie McGregor. Hello, Kathie.
Hello.
Well, Kathie, as I was saying before Teddy woke and we started our conversation, recording our conversation, I have been reading your fabulous book, A Puppy Called Wolfie. And as I said, I am in love with Wolfie. Because apart from anything else, he is an Irish wolfhound. And I've always thought they were the bee's knees where dog breeds are concerned. And Teddy has just laid down in disgust at discovering this awful betrayal. Oh, but on a more serious note, the subtitle to your book, A Passion for Free Will Teaching, is the thing that has drawn my attention to it. So I'd ask you please to tell us, what is free will teaching?
It is how to put something like this into a sentence.
It is basically
treating our dogs the same as we would
treat anybody else. You know, it's the same as, obviously with the differences in species and cognitive abilities, it's the same as bringing up a child. It's about giving them the right environment, nurturing their mind, understanding them, teaching them and guiding them. That's basically what it is.
I love the way that you talk about teaching instead of training. There is such a huge difference between them. So please tell us more.
There's a very big
difference between teaching and training. And you know, as people or as dogs, you know, both have their place in how we develop and how we learn as we grow up into adults. I think that unfortunately the emphasis is on training with dogs when it should be on teaching, and there's a lot of movement now and support for actually changing that and getting to where we want to be with dogs in terms of teaching. I mean, teaching is imparting knowledge. It is teaching something. It's teaching understanding and comprehension and awareness and the ability to not only understand yourself and your own mind, but actually what is going on in the world around you. Now, that's a very different thing to training. Training is about doing something repetitive to become better at it. So if we look at whether as kids and as adults, whether we do activities, you know, whether we learn music or a sport or sewing or cooking, whatever we might do, we are taught, but we are also trained. We repeat things to get better and increase and improve our competence. But alongside the training aspect of things, you know, every good teacher knows that actually you have to also teach not just the steps, the repetitive side of it, but actually the comprehension, the understanding and the awareness around the subject. Because if all you understand is to follow a recipe or a piece of music, you'll be competent, but you won't be brilliant. You need to understand it. You need to actually understand what it is that you're doing. And that comes from teaching.
Yes, indeed. And I think there's so much in what you've just said. For training is about the acquisition of a skill.
Yeah.
Practicing that skill. And whereas teaching is imparting a message, I feel. So when I am training Teddy, how am I going to go about training him? Because how I go about training him will teach him something. And,
yes, it will.
And that's, you know, crucial. What is the message I want to give Teddy when I'm working with him? The message I always want to give him is, trust me, let's work together. And what would you like to do? Or what you want to do about this? Those generally are the messages I want him to take away from our interactions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actively training him or not. So I think this is really crucial, isn't it?
Do you know, I think there's a further distinction to be made here, in that it's exactly as you just said. The way we train makes a difference to the learning experience and to the participant and what they actually get out of that. Now, I don't do any training whatsoever in terms of what people understand training to be with dogs. I do absolutely zero. However, that doesn't mean I can't teach my dogs to do something. I just don't train it, I teach it. And that is a big distinction. So my boy Remy, he loves doing tricks, and he started doing tricks right from when he was tiny, just sort of 3 odd months old, where we did something. And this hasn't come out of the basic obedience stuff that you do, the sit, the down, the stay, the leave it, because I haven't done any of that either. So we haven't done any positive reinforcement training, obedience commands, any of that stuff. But I was doing something, and he followed me, and I just did word association and put the name to it, and he's like, oh yeah, Mum, look, I can do this. I'm like, oh, okay then, would you want to try something else? And so by the time he was 5 months old, he knew about 20 different tricks. Now, there is no food in sight, no luring, no positive reinforcement, no reward, no non-reward marker, absolutely nothing. This is all done through teaching. Now, that's a very different experience for him than if I were to do it through training.
That's quite exciting. And just thinking back, there are things that Teddy has learned to do that I have not trained him to do in a formal sense. And one of those, actually, all of them involve jobs around the house. So he brings me my slippers. I didn't teach him to bring me my slippers. He sees me reach down to undo my laces when I get in, and he's off to get my slippers. That's what, it's what he does. It's simply that somewhere I have this vague memory of him in his first year, probably in the first 6 months, grabbing my slipper as I came in through the door, and me wanting to adopt the approach that I wasn't going to have a confrontation to retrieve anything from him, saying to him, "Oh, you have my slipper, is that for me?" And then him giving me my slipper, and this has now turned into all of this little routine in which he then puts my shoes away in the cupboard as well, for good measure. So it kind of evolved. And the other thing is loading the washing machine. I didn't actually formally train him to do this. It was, again, an activity which evolved because I wanted to avoid getting into this habit of you don't play with the laundry. So laundry. My thought was, this is not going to end well for me, because he has his own mind, and the more fuss I make about him grabbing the laundry, the more he's going to want it. Basically, I wanted to take the mystique out of the laundry, so I allowed him, because he wasn't a dog that chewed things as such. So I knew he wasn't going to put holes in anything. So I allowed him to play with the laundry as I sorted it. And then when it was time to tidy up, it was time to tidy up. And I would, pick up the laundry I was going to put in the machine, and I'd say, "It's tidy up time." And that evolved into him putting things back into the laundry basket. And then that evolved into the things that we were taking to the washing machine, him loading it. So it was this slow evolution of him wanting to participate in things, and me going, "Okay, that's what you want to do. Let's see what we can do with this." And I did not train him really for that.
No, you see, we all learn by association. We all do that. We all learn by associating things, learning routines, and we all learn by the consequences of our actions. That is not in doubt, regardless of whether you are teaching or training. That is how the mind learns. The difference is that if we train, we are specifically training for a condition response. We are taking the elements of self out of it. We're taking the thought, the comprehension, the awareness. We are simply saying, this is what we do. And whenever I ask for this, this is the response. Now, I realize I'm being very narrow here, because there are going to be lots of people that go, "You know what, it isn't as narrow and controlled as that." And it isn't these days. There's no two ways about it. There's an awful lot of people out there that are working with dogs and training dogs where it isn't so controlled as that. But if we look at the mechanics of what we're doing, when we're training and we're using external rewards, we are specifically training for a conditioned response. And that is what we expect to get. Now, that's very different to learning something by association and leaving our dogs to be able to do what they do within that routine as they learn that routine. And what they learn between the narrow training scenario, which I know is, I'm using that example very much to show the differences, because otherwise we're going to get into loads of nuance and we're going to talk for ages about the nuance of things. But that kind of conditioned training setup is very different to what is learnt through a natural association and working together and developing a routine, where each person is free to explore, learn and understand that routine as they want to. It's not a case of, well, no, you shouldn't be doing this, we need to aim for this goal. It's a case of, well, okay, so, well, this is our start, then let's take it from there and learn from there, which is exactly your example.
This is a very hard sell in some respects, because when a new puppy arrives, and they are a bundle of energy. The first instinct we might have is, we've got to get this puppy under control.
You see, now we have to examine that, don't we? Why is our first instinct to control?
Yeah.
Why is our first instinct not to guide, to support?
Because of the practicalities of life, because so many of us are in very tight schedules and very tight routines. Some people have children, people have jobs, they need to get things quickly done on time, and they want the puppy or the dog, because it could be an adult dog coming into the household, to adjust very quickly. But
you can't do that. That doesn't work. You wouldn't do that with a child. You wouldn't say to a child, I'm sorry, like, you know, you got to go to nursery. I know you're too young, but actually I've got to go to work. It's not a sound strategy. You cannot expect a puppy to fit in. And to be fair, you need, if you're going to have children, or you're going to have puppies or kittens or horses, you need to make sure you have the time to do that. And yes, everybody has constraints, we all do, but approaching it from a perspective of disregarding those constraints and trying to make your puppy fit into whatever shape box there is.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because so when Teddy arrives, and I had been doing some reading through some lovely behaviorists, and I really enjoyed, and I was doing some training with him. The thing that, there were several points at which I parted from the convention of positive reward training, and wanted to allow Teddy to explore things for himself. So the laundry and slippers are a classic example. The other thing was, of course, I took the advice of, you know, lots of the behaviorists I was reading, and I made sure that no shoes were left anywhere, because this was going to be an issue. I made one exception because he discovered an old pair of shoes of mine. And I thought, okay, he needs to get this out of his system. It was very much the laundry approach. And so I let him, you know, explore, you know, and play with the shoes. And he didn't destroy the shoes. You know, he just wanted to have a good sniff and lie on top of them, which reminded me of one of my cats who also liked to do that. So it was that, and also that whole thing about walking on lead. And I knew that this was not for Teddy, that walking to heel in the first 8 months was not going to work for him. It was, I used to call it my ritual humiliation every week in puppy class. This was not going to work. It was not going to happen. He needed to explore, he needed to smell. So we made a deal, Teddy and I. We ran on the way out of the house, and we walked on the way back home, because by then I realized he'd had his walk and he was feeling calm. And this was the time when we did our walking to heel training. So I had to, but all the time I had that feeling that I must be doing something wrong, that my puppy wasn't fitting into the mold, and that I was doing something wrong. But in my heart, I knew in my heart, I knew instinctively that I was not going to win this battle with Teddy and force him to walk to heel. I used to watch everybody walking sedately along with their dogs, sometimes more than one. I remember one woman with 2 dogs and a pram, thinking, oh, that's never going to be me.
Do you know, I think the same thing.
And of course, it is me now, because he walks beautifully alongside me most of the time. And that's the thing, is that I was prepared to say, okay, you may be an expert in the dog world, but I'm not prepared to do that that doesn't feel right to me, because my dog's not responding to that, and it's making us both stressed out trying to do it. So I allowed him to grow up, and things changed as he grew up. But it's a tricky thing when you make that choice to do what's not conventional.
It's perfectly normal for me.
And that's why I love your work.
Yeah, and you've got to experience life. You've got to learn yourself. You know, you don't develop impulse control and self-restraint and the ability to manage your emotional mind if you're controlled. You need to learn how to do that. You know, puppies are going to pick up and play with things that we'd rather they didn't. So we do, obviously, we're sensible. We don't just leave everything about and go, okay, well, whatever. We clear up, we make sure our home is safe, we make sure that if our favorite pair of shoes are important, we don't leave them out. We're tidy. I always say having a puppy makes you very tidy, and until they start to manage themselves, and you don't have to be tidy, and then of course it all goes to pot. But it's the same with kids, you know, when they start crawling and they're putting things in their mouths, you don't leave everything out, you clear up, you guide them through that life stage that they're in, knowing that actually they will progress and develop as they get older and as their mind develops. We don't expect them to instantly do what we want them to do.
We're talking about freedom, aren't we?
We are.
And I think that's the hard thing, because giving a puppy or a dog who's just come into the house freedom is
that's the easy thing, I'm going to tell you, because if you know how to do it properly, and you understand how to teach and what the mind is doing and how to guide, the issues that people have with puppies that go on for months, I don't see, my clients don't see, because we do it in a different way. That freedom doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean you just do what you want. Freedom means you guide each individual being so that they become aware and they manage themselves. I don't want to manage my dog for the entirety of his life. He's perfectly capable of managing himself. I mean, they're perfectly capable of managing themselves within a few weeks.
And that's the beauty, isn't it? I mean, I was just thinking, because you were talking about chewing and objects, etc. Well, funnily enough, the other thing that Teddy is really good at is not chewing things. And that, I mean, he has toys going right back to when he was a puppy. And I'm absolutely certain it's because when he was getting a little bit over enthusiastic with something, one of us would say, "Now, no bitey, Teddy." And it was just this little, oh. And he just didn't destroy anything.
It's giving them awareness. I would say be careful with it. Can you feel what it's doing? Can you feel how strong you are? You know, feel your teeth, feel that this is mum's finger. Be careful. You know, it's about teaching and giving them that awareness so they manage themselves.
And now I have, well, very quickly, I say now, he's now a very full-grown adult, but very quickly within that first year, we realized we could trust him to not destroy things. And, you know, and also it was things like, if he did grab hold of something he shouldn't, I would say to him, "No, that's not a toy. Go and get a toy." And that's it. I could say, to this day, I could say to him, "Now that's not a toy. I know he's trying to get my attention. If he grabs a tea towel, I say, that's not a toy. Put it away, go and get a toy." And he does put it away, and he does go and get a toy. And it still feels like magic that he does that, because it's such a delightful thing to see him do. But it all came from that, you know, when he was going a little bit wild with one of his toys, and we would say, "Teddy, no bitey, settle down." And he would settle down. And it's a sweet process, actually.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
So what happens when you get someone who has a supposedly well-trained dog, but has realized that perhaps their dog needs to let loose a little bit? They've become a little bit too self-controlled. How do you go about allowing that dog a little bit more freedom in order to build confidence?
Okay, so to start with, confidence doesn't come from one thing. It comes from living life. It comes from experiences. It comes from the support you get from your family. It comes from exploring, experimenting. It comes from all those things. But going back to your question about a dog that perhaps has been brought up in a more controlled way, then you start the same as you'd start with a puppy. You start by teaching. You know, you start by teaching some awareness, some comprehension. You use language, because we can get so much across if we have a conversation and we actually teach language. So we teach that in a proper educational manner, so that we can convey so much more than we can with hand signals or single words. And we take it from there.
So then it's never too late.
No.
And that's beautiful.
You know,
isn't it?
everybody has the capacity to learn and change their perspective, given the right guidance, knowledge and environment. You know, that's the same for all of us.
And that's really beautiful, isn't it? Because essentially what we're saying then is that your dog, if you feel is lacking in confidence for some reason, that just changing the approach to perhaps a less pressured approach can make.
If that's the reason for a lack of confidence, of course, don't forget that it isn't simple, and we can't, it would be terrible to say, if your dog has been brought up within a very strong positive reinforcement setting where they've had a lot of training, that's a lack of confidence. It isn't. You know, confidence, as I've said, comes from so many different aspects, and you can be a confident, outgoing dog with lots of different ways that you've been brought up.
Yes, I agree, and I not exactly what I meant, but
Sorry.
but I absolutely. And what I was actually getting at is that if there was a concern, there was a concern that perhaps there was a little bit of a lack of confidence because the dog hasn't had enough opportunity to make its own choices, that opening things up a little bit, it's not too late.
Certainly not. No. A lot of the behavior cases that I work with, and my two colleagues who also do free will teaching, we work with dogs that have quite significant issues through to from many different reasons, and lack of confidence, you know, and we can turn it around.
How would this approach help an anxious dog, for instance, or a reactive dog?
Well, you know, we're all anxious when we don't know what's going on. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But honestly and truly, it is simple as that. If we don't know what's going on, we're anxious. And if we can give our dogs that understanding and comprehension and awareness, not just of the situation, but also of their ability to manage themselves and choose what they do to get themselves out of a situation that they find uncomfortable, it's empowering.
And what about something that will be sadly affecting many dogs in the coming month or so? Something like a fear of fireworks. How could we help our dogs be less fearful in those sorts of circumstances?
Again, it comes down to, there's no quick fix, is the first thing to tell you. You know, there is no, okay, do A, do B, do C, and your dog will be fine. That doesn't exist. it takes time. In the case of fireworks and thunderstorms, we also have the differences in, you know, the atmospheric pressure, and we have a very concentrated, with fireworks, a very concentrated, very, very loud noises. And do you know, there are going to be some dogs that are forever going to be fearful of that, just as I will forever be fearful of spiders. And just because I have mentioned that particular subject, I'm now, because I'm in my husband's man cave at the moment, so it's nice and quiet, because this is the time when my two dogs are going, come on mum, let's do something, which is no good for our interview. But just because I've mentioned spiders, and as much as I cope with them, yeah, I'm looking around now going, oh blimey, I've just thought of them, maybe there's one about. So yes, we can work with the dogs to giving them that understanding, comprehension, awareness, ability to know how they feel and know what to do to help themselves, will completely resolve things for some dogs, but it won't for others, because of course we're all individuals, and some things we are forever going to find scary.
What I love all the time that I'm listening to you is that you are constantly stressing the importance of explaining and talking, communicating with our dogs. And I guess that's been the joy of being with Teddy for me, is the constant communication that exists between us. I did used to be a teacher, a primary school teacher, and so teaching Teddy has been, I feel that I was a teacher in order to train to be a mum to Teddy. That was my training for, and that was the reason why I had that job for, what was it, 12 years? I did that. I think the sole purpose was to prepare me for Teddy, because I do feel that that is the very thing that really helped me understand what I needed to do to help him. It just happened. It was very instinctive. It's not like I knew everything. I didn't. I did so much reading. I went to so many workshops, talked to so many people, and my education continues because he continues to teach me. But having said that, the training that I had really helped.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love hearing you when you're talking about, you know, that two-way way of looking at things, and the addressing the emotional side. That makes me very happy when I hear you talk.
Thank you.
So what happens when somebody comes to you for a consultation? Give us an idea.
We have a good old chat. We obviously we start with just looking at what the issue is, and then we don't need to go into a huge amount of detail at this stage about what it is, but we just look at what the issue is. Then we look at understanding who the dog is. You know, it's funny that I'm saying the word issue because people will understand what that means. But if I say to you, our dogs don't necessarily have issues. They are at the place they are at because of their genetics, their personality, their life experiences. And obviously there's a difference between issues that result in a dysfunctional mind and issues that are considered by society and culture as to be not acceptable. But each dog is where they are at that time because of who they are and their life. So it's really about understanding the individual dog, the influences there, the parts of the issue, because I'm going to use that word just for the sake of this, you know, the parts of that which are actually normal for that dog, considering the breed, for example. The parts of that actually are dysfunctional and are leading that dog's mind to actually not have a healthy way of working. And so we start from that perspective. It's all about the dog and what that dog needs to progress and to develop himself or herself.
Indeed. And I just listening to you again, I was thinking about that word issue. And really, you're quite right. It's my issue a lot of the time. If there is a clash between what Teddy thinks is reasonable and what our society thinks is reasonable, or what I think is reasonable. His issues are his issues. He does absolutely have an issue with larger dogs. This is,
well, you know what, that's fine. So you know, we don't all,
and I have that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't all like everybody we meet, and if we have had an experience with a certain thing, we do, but even people do, we tend to generalize.
Exactly. And so that's his issue, and I all I can do is help him as much as I can with that issue. And then there are things that are his issue because of me. He does not enjoy going, you know, to have his hair cut, which will be happening next week. So that is an issue for the two of us, which I have had to learn how to approach in a way that's acceptable to him.
Exactly. What can you do to help
We've
him?
We've muddled along, and yes, he takes issue with certain things. And when he takes issue with certain things, then I have to muddle along and find the right approach so that he says, yeah, I could do this now. This is
absolutely okay. And do you know,
this
is
tolerable.
Being equal. That is, you know, if we have a friend or a husband or family, we all have our own things that we like and we don't like, and we don't say to them, you know what, you just get on with it. You don't like it, but you are going to have to do it. We allow people to be able to have their likes and dislikes, their preferences, and if it's something that is necessary for health or safety, then obviously we will help that person, that friend, that family member, that partner through that, and find a way of approaching it that means that they can deal with that if there is genuinely an issue.
You know, the word you use there is, that's the key word, is equal. And I am so adamant about this, that this is a relationship in which we are equal. And what I have wanted to avoid was getting into a power struggle with Teddy. And this is the problem I see time and again, where people want to turn it into a power struggle. What I say must go to varying degrees. It's usually not that extreme, but it's still, you know, they have to. And I feel like, okay, well, there are some things that are non-negotiable. He does need to go and have his hair cut. That's non-negotiable. But there's a lot of room for negotiation in how we go about it.
Yes.
And yes, you know, there are some things where I do know better because I see things he doesn't see. But again,
It's
have,
only health things and safety things, the rest of it. How can we say you can't express this, you can't do that? They're their own being.
exactly. And that's what I always felt, was that it's, you know, some people would think that my approach is quite extreme, because, for instance, you know, when it comes to the grooming situation, I wash him and blow dry him at home because he can't bear the blow dryer at the groomer.
But why is that extreme? Isn't that just being nice?
Just being considerate. I do it now. I do it with a huge amount of time so he can take breaks, because he finds the whole thing too intense. And so we have worked hard, or I have worked hard, to work out what is going to make this a tolerable experience for Teddy. For me, that's not extreme at all.
No, it isn't.
The most reasonable course of action, because I don't expect him to just be a robot.
You can't just say, you know what, you hate it, so what, get on with it.
Exactly. And that would be hugely unfair. So yes, my approach by many people would be considered to be pandering in the extreme. I don't see it in that way. I see it as, if it takes a Herculean effort to make something intolerable tolerable for Teddy, that's what I'm doing, because he has the right, in my mind, to not have something he hates imposed upon him.
Exactly.
And I would do that, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I agree. I think making something that you hate and you can't tolerate tolerable should be reserved to necessary things. I don't believe it should be applied to, this is what I want, so you will get used to it and I'll do it in that way. This is, we do this for things that actually are very important to our health and safety. I am very, very bad with the dentist, and that's been something that I have really, really struggled with over the years. I have been terrified. It doesn't help that my teeth aren't brilliant and I like eating sweets, which certainly doesn't help. And you know, somebody telling me, well, you've got to go to the dentist, just get on with it and do it, is not going to work. I'm going to get worse. But somebody saying to me, you know what, we'll take it easy, we'll take the time, we'll just have a look in your mouth today, oh, we'll just do a little bit here, and you know what, we can just stop and you can come back and we can, and doing that in a different way means that actually I am no longer terrified of going to the dentist. And that is really the best way of working when we are dealing with fears and anxieties that we do need to manage in order to keep ourselves either safe or healthy.
How did you develop this approach?
Because I didn't develop it.
How did it happen that you took this approach? Because for me with Teddy, it was doing all the reading versus what Teddy was doing, and me going, I'm going to take a little bit of what I've been reading and what I've been learning, but ultimately it's down to Teddy. What happened to you? How did you develop this, or how did it evolve within you?
Naturally, I was already doing this when I took my qualifications as an animal behaviourist, and I took the qualifications because I wanted to work with animals, but I was already doing this. I already had this approach. This is just naturally who I am and how I do things. So learning all the positive reinforcement stuff didn't come first and I changed. I actually learned that because I needed the qualification.
Yeah. And that's interesting because again, it was you following your heart that led you in this direction. It just felt, and that's exactly where I was, because I was at a place where I knew zero, and I felt I needed to learn everything very, very quickly. But my heart often was at odds with what I was with what I was reading, and my heart just went, no, that's not what we're doing. And that was down to Teddy. And
Yeah.
Teddy, no, I would walk sensibly by your side on a lead. Thank you very much. I want to take in the world, at all of it, all at once, at speed. And that's what he did. I lost weight that first year running after him.
Yes. That's easy to do, isn't it?
My personal trainer, that's what he was on that first personal trainer in so many ways. Oh, well, Kathie, if people want to learn more about your work, how do they do that?
Will be very welcome to come and join my group. It's called There Is More to Teaching Dogs Than Training Dogs. And there's a lot of information in there about how we work and the ethos and everything behind it.
And is this on Facebook or?
It is on Facebook, yes.
Okay. I will have a link to that in the description box, along with your wonderful, wonderful book, A Puppy Called Wolfie. Because what I love about it is that it is absolutely, it's your diary. And through reading it, we have such a wonderful sense of tips and things that we can do to help our dogs. And of course, I've been talking about Wolfie, but you also have, and I'm just trying to flip through a picture of the two of them, because, there. Look.
I do love that picture.
This picture is just absolutely gorgeous. And we're talking, of course, about your beautiful Remy. So yes. There's how you introduce another dog. There's everything that you ever need to know to set you up for success.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people saw, and I wrote what actually happened rather than the sort of condensed version, and people go, well, how did you get from there to there? So you've read about Wolfie stealing the Yorkshire puddings, but then to be fair, he's his own boy. He wasn't stealing them. They were for him anyway, as well as us. He was just taking them in advance of dinner. Now, if we look at that as a different perspective, it's not stealing. And my approach was obviously, oh, did you like that? Well, you better have another one then. Again, we're teaching and we're guiding and we're embracing the personality of the dogs we're with. We're not saying, well, actually, I'm in control here. You shouldn't have had a Yorkshire pudding. You shouldn't have helped yourself. When I was a kid, I'd help myself. If my mum made cakes, I would definitely be reaching up there to take one of those cakes without being invited.
That is so true. Teddy, if it's on the counter, of course it's his. And why wouldn't it be, particularly if it smells delectable, like the time when I had defrosted, he has allergies, and I cook for him, and I had defrosted, I think, about 2 or 3 kilos worth of venison liver, and made liver cakes, and I had put them in the dining room to cool. And he, unbeknownst to, I was with his daddy thought he was with me. He was having a party all by himself, and of course he had a lovely time. And then in the night we were up because he had a tummy ache. Well, that's what happens when you overindulge with
Yes, it does. But you know, as we continue to teach and guide our dogs, just as we do children, they then learn that self-restraint. So instead of going, oh, brilliant, it's there, I want it right now, and it might be too hot, and you go, okay, I'll wait for it then. And so they naturally develop that. I mean, obviously with a wolfhound, by the time he was 7 months or something, he was already taller than the kitchen counters anyway, you know. So it's no good relying on, well, he can't reach, so I don't have to do anything. And I have no intention of going, well, if there's stuff on the counter, you've got to go and sit there. I would rather teach him to be around food. And if he's, you know, as a youngster, he's impulsive, and so he will help himself. But as they get older, they're not so impulsive, and they go, oh, Mum, is it ready? Is it cool enough? Can I have one? Just the same as we would.
I have to say, ours continues to be impulsive. And I swear he either has a little button on his legs that he presses for stilts, or carries an invisible stool with him, because he would not imagine he could reach, but he does. Have to be very, very careful about not leaving things within his reach.
No, and that's fair enough, because that's part of his personality. Now, just going back to you talking about lead walking with Teddy and how he walks lovely on the lead with you now, my Remy, oh my goodness, he's still a puller, and that's part of his personality. I don't think, he's 6.5 now, I don't think that's ever going to change. There are moments when we're on a walk and he walks right next to me, and I say to my husband, look how brilliant he is, he's walking next to me on a loose lead. And then 10 seconds later he'll be back in front going, come on, Mum, what are you hanging about at? You know, and that's just a part of his personality. That is just that.
It's the joy of knowing who they are. And I have a dog that wants to work with me, not a dog that obeys me. And if I thought that Teddy just obeyed me, I would be heartbroken. I want him to be himself, and I want him to have freedom to be himself.
You know, I think that's what we all want for our dogs. And our horses, our cats, we all want that. I think it's just that it's been difficult for people to find a way of how to get there.
And it's true. And it's, you know, he walks nicely alongside me now. He's my little companion, I would say 70% of the time, which is, for him, is amazing. I never thought we'd get to this point. Where it goes differently is when we're in a new place. And when we're in a new place and he's excited, he is like he used to be when he was, you know, under 1, and I am having to walk at his pace, most definitely. Okay, well, I understand. He might find it exciting. He might be anxious. I don't know whether, I know he's aroused, but I don't know whether he's anxious or he's excited, and needs to map everything out and know where everything is. But whatever it is, he's got to do what he's got to do, and I'm just going to help him.
Yeah, definitely.
So I will be putting a link to your wonderful book about Wolfie and Remy in the description box, along with the link to your Facebook group. And a huge thank you to you, Kathie, for your time today and for your wonderful work.
You are very welcome. It's been lovely talking to you.
And thank you all for watching. And we hope that this conversation has inspired you. And until next time, goodbye.